In today's video, a few tips on how you can increase protein and cut the fat. Hey guys, what's going on? This is Paul Ravella from ProPhysique.com. In today's video, we're gonna discuss a question that I got from my Instagram direct message. So as you guys are well aware, I love doing these videos. I love answering the question. I love taking my decade of experience of coaching, my education, and helping you guys work towards your fitness goals. And we're constantly coming out with incredibly fun and exciting ways to help you guys. So today we're gonna highlight one of those ways. But first I wanna read you the question and then we'll discuss it. It's time for me to get serious about dropping this quarantine 15, maybe 20. Doing modest cardio just for general fitness and weight training. Just used your macro calculator and I'm seeing that I need to cut fat and increase protein a fair amount. Here's my question. Could you please share some tips and your favorite ways to get enough quality protein each day? You know, besides eating nothing but skinless chicken breast and green beans every day. Okay, so the great part about this question is accountability, because I think a lot of us, at least that are interested in, putting on some muscles, what we do is we go, hey, I know I need to eat more protein. But if you just try to increase your protein intake without actually paying attention to the other macronutrients that are involved, it's very easy to therefore just overeat calories. And especially young men, especially myself when I was younger, I was happy to just eat more calories. And you can get a lot of protein from sources that are not typically protein sources we would consider. Something like ice cream, something like pasta, this actually has quite a bit of protein in it. However, you're gonna get a lot of fats and carbs with your protein, depending on how you consume it. So this person used our macro calculator. So for those that aren't familiar, at ProPhysique.com, we have a free macro calculator. You don't have to pay for one. You can go in there and put in a lot of information. It's actually quite robust. It gives you a lot of options for things like how you wanna hit your macros, what kind of diet you wanna use. And I think it's very good. It's a very good basic setup for how to define what your macronutrients should be. And for anyone that's not familiar, the philosophy that I believe as someone who's trying to, reach their fitness goals, lose weight, gain muscle, whatever it might be, you have to be accountable, okay? There's lots of different styles of dieting. Macro tracking is not a style of dieting. It's a philosophy around you track the macros of whatever diet you prefer. You can be a vegan, heck, you can choose any of the diets that you've heard of before, right? Paleo, keto, whatever it is, and still track your macros. It's all about accountability. So what this person did was they plugged in some numbers, they started tracking, and they realized that while they were trying to hit their protein goals, their fat goals were actually being exceeded. Now the problem with that is that fat is 9 calories per gram. Protein is only 4 calories per gram. So if you're outpacing fat from protein, it's going to likely lead to fat gain, okay? And I know a lot of people like to argue about the idea that, well, if you keep your carbs low, you won't gain fat because insulin is low. Well, that's complete nonsense, because you do not need insulin to store body fat if you're taking in a lot of nutritional fat. So what we need to do is control calories. Don't worry about the insulinogenic effect of fat storage, because if you're in a deficit, that won't matter, right? What we need to focus on is our overall macronutrient ratios and creating a caloric deficit for long periods of time. That's the sustainable way to lose body fat. Everyone knows that watches my channel, I love keeping carbohydrates in a place where we can perform and have good energy throughout the day. I don't believe in using a 0 calorie or like a restricted carbohydrate approach for those that wanna focus on performance. So what I'm gonna explain today is just some of my favorite ways to get protein and not get a bunch of fat, because I think, when I first got into bodybuilding competitively, that was the toughest thing for me. It's like, okay, where do I get my protein from if I really want to keep fats low? And honestly, in my mind, if you learn to limit your fat intake, that is going to be the most successful way that we're able to lose body fat, okay? I find that those people that bring their fats down into the range where, I typically find my fats when I'm in a fat loss phase are around 50 grams a day, might be 70, might be 40, but for the bulk of, a fat loss phase, it's gonna be around that 50 gram mark. It really makes me have to be conscious of where I'm getting my carbohydrates from and where I'm getting my protein from. So we all know about chicken breast, right? Anytime you think of protein, you think of lean meat sources. So some of my favorite lean meat sources, I love tuna. I love white fish. Any type of white fish that I can grill or I can smoke, I'm a big fan of. So typically white fishes are gonna be very lean, but there's lots of other lean sources of meat besides chicken. Everyone gets so sick of chicken, but if you go to the store and just look around, you can find some incredibly good sources. I love turkey, okay? And sometimes I'll go get the lean turkey from the deli sliced, okay? So sliced deli meats are a great way to hit your protein goals without hitting any other macronutrients, okay? The real difficulty is just finding some meats that work. You know, things like ham typically are gonna have a little bit more fat, but you can even find some leaner versions of pork products, okay? So finding meats that work for you is a great way. But if you're like, hey Paul, I don't really like getting a lot of meat, well, if you don't wanna try fish, you can find some options that are more vegan based. Vegan companies have come out with things like protein crumbles. My client Natalie turned me on to things like seitan and tofu, things that are options that are a little bit more high protein based, but the vegan companies are coming out with a lot of great options. And with that in mind, you know, probably as a bodybuilder, the #1 source for protein is whey protein. Why? Well, because it has a freaking wonderful leucine content, right? And leucine is what drives muscle protein synthesis. So what you can really focus on is protein sources like eggs and egg whites and whey protein, which have a great leucine content. Now, obviously, if you're worried about fat content, whole eggs are gonna have more fat than something like egg whites. What I typically do is I'll have like a cup of egg whites with like 1 or 2 whole eggs just to get that yolk in there for flavor and consistency. But you can see how by only having 1 or 2 whole eggs, you keep the fat to that meal a little bit lower. So eggs are another great option. But the thing that's really benefited me, so a couple of years ago in my 30s, I realized I had developed like an intolerance to whey protein. Whey protein, even isolates, which are, if you're not familiar with whey and isolates are actually even supposed to be easier to digest, and the macro profile is actually even a little better than whey. Whey protein, whey concentrate, isolate can have a little bit of fat and carbs in there, right? But neither of those worked well with me. In fact, terribly with me. My digestion would be terrible. I would be a mess for several hours, even sometimes a couple days. So I worked with my supplement sponsor. So I am sponsored by a company called Core Nutritionals. And I spoke with our company and I said, hey, I'd really like to come out with a protein powder that I can use. And I had tried all the vegan protein powders, and I'll be honest, they tasted like junk to me. Most of them are afraid to use sweeteners that actually sweeten because, you know, they come from a background where they're focused on their philosophies. Well, at Core Nutritionals, we wanted to create a product that was not only like evidence-based, but for me to digest. So I've been able to add this in. This is the vegan series. So this is the PR series, PR for Paul Ravella. And there's multiple flavors of the vegan protein powder. And I'll tell you, as far as I'm concerned, I love it. Like I can put it with just water and mix it up, or I often make it with smoothies. But I'll read you the macros for a serving of this. 1 scoop is 2 carbs, 21 protein, and 3 fat, right? So you're able to get a good amount of protein and keep the other macros low, just like if you're getting something like some lean meats or a protein source that would typically, you know, have a macronutrient profile that would fit your goals. The thing that really helps with protein powder, and the thing that I was missing from my life with not having whey, is just the ease of use, right? So it's so easy to just bring your protein powder with you. If you're traveling, sometimes I'll put it in baggies. It's just so I have some source of protein, because that, honestly, when you're traveling, is usually the most difficult thing. Like if you're in an airport, you know, you can be pretty limited, and sometimes I don't want to pay $15 for a bag of beef jerky. That's another one of my go-to moves. Sometimes when I see beef jerky on sale, like at a Walmart or a Target, I'll buy lots of pouches of that and I'll put them in my backpack for when I travel, because I'm often at shows on the weekends. Beef jerky is basically almost all protein, depending on, you know, what kind you get, but you're gonna have a much higher percent of protein than you are at the other macronutrients. And this is another great way to get protein in. I've also used things like protein bars. You know, sometimes because of, you know, my issue with whey protein, it can get difficult for me to use protein bars. So sometimes I'll lean on something like a complete cookie, which is a vegan option, but the macros of a complete cookie are not very good when it comes to, you know, carbs and fats. But when you're trying to focus on getting your protein goals, you know, sometimes you got to fit that in. I prefer, as a coach and as an athlete myself, what I really find to be the most successful is if I try to get my fats from fat sources, my carbs from carb sources, and my protein from protein sources. And what I mean by that is, if I'm gonna get a lot of carbs in a day, I'll stick to sources that are mostly just carbohydrates, things like rices and potatoes and things like that. If I'm gonna get my proteins, I'm gonna get them from, you know, single source items like chicken, like turkey, whatever it might be. And what that does is that creates volume. You get more food volume, okay? So, and if I'm gonna get my fats, you know, I love things like nuts. I love things like oils that are gonna really help me get that, just that single ingredient. Obviously, avocado is another good one of those. Now, when my calories are higher and I'm not trying to restrict, I love ingredients that allow me to get food volume, things like pasta that have protein and carbs in them, right? It's all about where you're at in the process. But if you're trying to bring fats down and get protein up, you know, these are a lot of good ways that I do it. I think, you know, egg whites, beef jerky, protein powders, whey proteins, or vegans are all great options. I do have a discount code if you're interested in the vegan proteins. You know, I'm gonna toot my own horn. They're the best tasting vegan proteins out there. And I'm not myself a vegan, but digestively speaking, me and whey, we're just not friends. I've tried it and it just does not work for me. So hopefully this helps you understand how to hit your macronutrient goals while focusing on keeping your protein high, your fats low, and help you work towards your goals. Hope you guys are having a great Monday, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.